I saw Fantastic Four First Steps, and it is, dare I say, fantastic.
Say that again?
With an explosion in content after years of average to below average creative output, Marvel and Kevin Feige seem to be getting their footing with Fantastic Four First Steps, which to me is one of my favorite Marvel films. So let's talk about it. Hey Internet, I'm Chris, and this is the place on the internet where I talk about comics, movies, games, and things I'm generally passionate about. If you want to hear more about Fantastic Four First Steps, the MCU, Marvel, and comics, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. I love Fantastic Four. I have to say, as I talk about this movie, before we get too into it, I will dive into spoilers. The way I like to talk about movies is I like to jump back and forth in kind of like a stream of consciousness of things I like. So I might go back and forth, and some spoilers might slip out about the story, some potential things that we'll see in the future, and plot points in the movie. So if you haven't seen Fantastic Four First Steps, please go see it and then come back to this video. As I record this, it's been about a day since I seen Fantastic Four First Steps. I took my family, it was a good time, and as I've been sort of like letting it simmer in my brain, the movie has gotten better and better as I've kind of walked away from it, which I think is a really good thing. I think sadly, like, because of the internet, and I think expectations and all the things that, I mean, the personal things you bring into the movie, sometimes there's expectations that can really kill what you feel about a particular movie. I think Fantastic Four First Steps, what's really cool about it is that it does a great job of letting you know, just through the story, I mean, not really letting you know, but through the story, they don't sort of, it's its own thing. It's is very much its own thing. It's set on Earth 828. Obviously, it is sort of like this retro future world where the Fantastic Four are the heroes of this universe and the only heroes. There's no Spider-Man, there's no Iron Man, there's none of that. And we kind of knew that going in, but I think when I was going in, I expected them to kind of like make references like, oh, like there's, Sue is a part of the UN with the Future Foundation. You'd assume that, hey, maybe we hear things like Wakanda or Latveria or maybe in Atlantis, like all these like little references and Easter eggs. And I'm sure there's certain things in it, but it isn't sort of like blaring at you, and I think it kind of really allows you and allows the cast to kind of like tell their own story. And Matt Shakman does a really great job of really focusing on the characters. He took a lot of care, and there's clear, like, I'm not the biggest Fantastic Four fan, whether it be in the comics or like the animated series or anything like that. I remember going to the Fantastic Four movies when I was younger. I'll never forget seeing The Rise of the Silver Surfer and Galactus showing up as a cloud and being like, wait, that's it. I was so confused because back then, I think I was in middle school or like either my first year of high school. There was no like, yeah, they had trailers and stuff like that. And, like it was, you could go online and there were things, there wasn't the same type of like leak and spoiler culture that there is now. There isn't like TikTok where like if a movie comes out, the entire like movie is on the platform already. So when that happened, I was like, what the fuck? It was insane. But yes, Matt Shakman does a really great job. The cast, there were a lot of things where I was like, I don't know about Pedro as Reed. He's amazing as Reed. Vanessa Kirby is great as Sue Storm. Joseph Quinn, really solid as Johnny Storm. And then obviously Ebon, I can never pronounce his name, even though I love him in The Bear, is great as Ben Grimm. And even though it's shorter, and I think Superman kind of suffered from this too, where it's like about 2 hours or a little under 2 hours. I think it does a really great job of sort of like giving you a lot of character moments for each character. And then even things that I wasn't expecting, I was like, when they cast Julia Garner as Silver Surfer, I was confused. I was like, oh, why don't you just do Nora and Rad? Yes, it's an alternate universe and all that kind of stuff. But they actually have a really cool like story reason, and it makes Johnny a lot more involved in the story. They make Johnny a little bit smarter than he's kind of been portrayed in the past, particularly in the movies that we've seen before. I just really like the movie, and also because I'm a parent, I took my family to see it. There's some things I think it does a really good job of sort of like capturing the anxiety of being a parent, and also sort of the relationship that Sue and Reed have. I think Pedro has some really great moments with Franklin talking about his struggles, and I think Shackman does a great job of sort of capturing like his guilt over the accident that caused them to have their superpowers, but also sort of the fact that he's this family really grounds him emotionally, because if he didn't have his family, where his mind would go, because his mind immediately goes to cold and calculated the worst outcomes possible, because he's a problem solver. That's what he does. And at the, sort of like what's driving the story is that Galactus is coming to this planet to eat it, and he's willing to spare it if they give up their baby Franklin, and they don't want to do that. But Reed has put that in his mind as a possibility. And, for the other family members, that's not even something on the table. But for Reed, he at least has to consider it in terms of like the way his mind works. And Pedro really does a great job of sort of like portraying that. And again, I'm not a big Fantastic Four fan by any means. I think there's been some things I've liked, like Life Story. When I read Secret Wars, it really inspired me to kind of go into Jonathan Hickman's run. And I've been meaning, like, also, I think what really kind of tells you how good a comic book movie is how quickly you're like, all right, like, where can I find more stories from these characters? And I was definitely on the Marvel Unlimited app, starting the Mark Waid run and stuff like that. And yeah, like I said, after it, at first I was like, oh, I like this. And the more I think about it, I'm like, wow, they did some really cool things that Marvel movies just aren't able to do anymore. I really like Thunderbolts. It was probably my favorite Marvel thing in years. And at first when I watched this, I was like, "Oh, I think I like Thunderbolts better." And then as I thought about it, I'm like, "Man, this is really good." And I think, what Feige and Marvel have been able to do this last year, where they've kind of like, cut down on the output. They've been able to kind of focus on the quality. Like even Captain America Brave New World, which is problematic in its story and all that, like it could have been way worse considering the amount of like reshoots and how it was chopped up and all that. So the fact that it was even somewhat cohesive when it came out, I enjoyed it when I watched it. And I think the bar is so low with the Marvel movies that I thought like, oh, it was okay. And Thunderbolts exceeded my expectations, and I think Fantastic Four, even as a DC fan, and I saw Superman, and I felt like the expectations I had, and some of the tie-ins, and like it's building a world and all that, really dragged it down for me. I think Fantastic Four is the opposite of that, because despite it being this thing that's supposed to be a lead into Avengers Doomsday, is that the story is very much the story being told here. There's only one thing, which is the post-credit scene, or the mid-credit scene, and that's the only thing that kind of really sets anything up or really ties it to the Marvel universe. I'm sure if you watch New Rockstars or stuff like that, there's probably a bunch of Easter eggs I missed, but it's not like blaring at you. And I also appreciated that it felt different. It didn't have that typical Marvel and MCU humor that we've gotten since the Avengers and Guardians of the Galaxy. Like, you don't have that moment where like Galactus shows up and it's like, oh, he's behind me, isn't he? Like that kind of stuff is not in the movie, or like emotional moments kind of being killed by a joke that follows and stuff. And it does have some really emotional moments, especially the space sort of the chase between the Silver Surfer and the Fantastic Four is amazing. When Franklin is on Sue at the end, that's really emotional. And I think they really sort of like bigged up a lot of the characters. I think with Reed, even though Pedro is great, I think it has a lot. It relies on you as an audience member to kind of understand who Reed is as a character, which I kind of respect. But I think if you don't know who the Fantastic Four are and stuff like that, you might be questioning like, oh, like why is Reed like this? I think those lines of dialogue for me, as someone that's kind of has a somewhat of a grasp of who that character is, I was like, oh, like that is really cool and stuff like that. And I think Superman did that too with Lex Luthor, where they kind of expect you to kind of have an understanding of who this person is. Yeah, and I just really loved it. I think again, for a movie to be that, and I after Superman, I've been trying to kind of like enjoy things a little bit more. Like I was like, man, did I ruin my experience of Superman because of my expectations? Because I can't turn off some critic brain that I've sort of like hat on and stuff like that. Like, let me just enjoy these things like I used to, you know? And Fantastic Four like was able to take me to a whole different world that I kind of like would prefer it to sort of be just the Fantastic Four. I actually kind of after this like have very little interest in them interacting with other aspects of the mainline MCU, which is a very different world. Like I loved another aspect of it that I think Shackman did a really good job was sort of like capturing like optimism. You have a society that's willing to kind of come together, turn off their lights because they need power to fight Galactus. Those kind of things, especially in our like this day and age, like if it was set in the mainline MCU, I'd be like, that makes no sense. These people wouldn't do that. And I think even Thunderbolts, which I liked, you're kind of like watching that happen in New York, and in your head, you're like, where's Spider Man? Where's Daredevil? Where's Punisher? You're asking all these different questions. Whereas with this, you're kind of like, hey, like, this is a new world. They've established, like, hey, this is a very future looking world, a very aspirational world, you know, kind of set that backdrop of like the space race and Tomorrowland, like all those kind of cool things. So I think from a production design, from a world building perspective, the characters, I just love the movie, and I just want to talk about that. Like the post credit scene. Spoiler alert! You know we see Doom with Franklin, and again I was just like, okay, I know Avengers Doomsday is happening, but hey, it would be really cool to get a Fantastic Four First Step sequel with just in this world. So hopefully, when they reset all these things and all that, we're able to enjoy a true Fantastic Four sequel eventually, because I love these characters and I love this world that they've created. So hopefully we see it. And again, it's cool to see them prove me wrong in a lot of aspects. Like I said, the Silver Surfer aspect, the Pedro Pascal as Reed Richards. You can see why he's booked and busy. He's just a fantastic actor, pun intended. Uh, and I loved him as Reed, and I want more of him as Reed. Vanessa Kirby as Sue, Ben Grimm, Joseph Quinn as Human Torch. He did look, a little older than I have Johnny in my head and stuff like that. But it's kind of cool that they made him a little smarter, and there's a reason why each person was on that ship when they went on that expedition. So I love the movie, and I hope you did too. Like I'm sort of on that train of being like, hey, like Marvel, they've put down the output. They're focusing on quality control. It's not really inspiring. It's not really inspiring confidence that as they're shooting Avengers Doomsday, they're writing it. So I'm like, how good that could that be? But again, now that Feige can really focus, and Marvel and their executives can focus on 1 to 2 projects instead of 20, hopefully the quality control is there. And you've seen it again with Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four. And I just can't wait to see these characters. It'll be cool to see them interact with others. But again, I'm less so interested in that after seeing the world of Earth 828. Yeah, what did you guys think? Did you love Fantastic Four? What did you think? Please let me know. Like, comment, subscribe. Peace.